Let's put our hands together for the band. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Too bad, is it? They're asking me for fullback. I said, you can't have fullback when you lean forward. Anyway, that's just a private joke, by the way. But we've got Paul Gask with us this morning. Let's put a wonderful Yeadon or wherever we are, warm hands together this morning. Paul's going to come and just share his life story with us this morning. Thank you.
When I travel around and speak at events such as this, I often get asked, I need some evidence of this Jesus character. I want to see some evidence. And I get that, because I was once upon a time with that mindset. And of course, the best evidence is, generally speaking, one of the 5 recognised senses. So it's something you see, hear, touch, taste, or smell. And that's really important that I start by saying that. And it will make sense why I've said that. Because my background is in policing. I was a police officer in Leicestershire for 34 and a bit years. So I know you're thinking, he must have joined when he was 9. Okay. I'll tell you what, when you say that to a female audience, they go, oh. When you say it to blokes, they just laugh. So there you go. So just by way of introduction, and I'll give you a little whiz through my policing career, but now I represent a national movement called Christian Vision for Men. There is some stuff on the table at the back which will give you a little bit more detail about what we're about. But in a nutshell, that's it. Introducing men to Jesus and the church to men. Notice it doesn't say men to church, it says the church to men. And we've got all sorts of strategies in order to get that to happen. Because there was a time when I found church completely irrelevant. And I'll expand on that in a few minutes. So my role with Christian Vision for Men changed during COVID. I was, once upon a time, the regional director for England North. That sounds grand. It's not. It sounds grand. My patch covers from Milton Keynes, it's in the north, and goes right up to Scotland. And I work with churches and church groups from across the denominations to try and encourage and train and support and motivate and kick fellas up the backside to tell their mate about his saviour. That's all I do. And as well as that, well, it changed. I mentioned COVID. My role changed during COVID because we almost ran out of money. So we had to make redundancies, etc., etc. And we lost a lot of our team. And we weren't very big in the first place, but we lost a lot of paid staff. I wasn't paid. I was helped out, but I didn't receive a salary as such. So my role changed when the money ran out, and my role now officially is voluntary network enabler for England North, which starts in Milton Keynes and goes right up to Scotland. So the role's the same. And I'm not saying that because I want to make you feel guilty. I'm just saying it because that's how it is. On top of that, along with my wife, we are involved with Edge Ministries, which you may be aware of. Again, there's some details on there where we have a real heart for the lost and the poor. And the church I worship in with my wife, it's on the edge of a big estate in Leicestershire, which, if I'm honest, is a local authority dumping ground. And it is. It's full of people with all sorts of vulnerabilities. And myself and my wife are amongst it, so to speak. Enough about that, otherwise I'll be here till final score. So I do that as well, and that keeps me occupied. So back to the policing side of my life. I joined the police when I was 21, and not 9, 21, and my career took me not very long in uniform. I quickly went into plain clothes, into CID, and in the 80s, 90s, it was very different to how it is now. And are you familiar with Life on Mars and Ashes to Ashes, those programs? Yeah, one or two of you are. That's what it was like. So my career has taken me to various plainclothes roles. I've worked in the Vice Squad, where I had access to all the pornography I wanted. That's interesting, isn't it? I've had my own issues. I've worked in the drug squad, I've worked in the surveillance unit, general CID. I spent 10 years working in a department which deals with mainly men who commit offences against women and children. You can label those however you like. The last 5 years of my career I spent working in police anti-corruption, which may explain why I don't seem to have many friends. And upon retiring in 2011, after my 30 years, I went back to work for the police as a civilian, and I spent 4.5 years working in counter-terrorism in Leicester. So you've got to have some questions about my police career. So let's ponder on that. I've been around a bit, as you can tell by my good looks. So I had no church or faith upbringing at all. And I went through my school years, and my prowess, I suppose, was, as Denver has so eloquently spoken about, football. And at age 13, I was selected to play for Leicester City youth team, alongside a bloke you may have heard of called Gary Lineker. Might have heard of him. Gary made the grade. I didn't. Training was good. It was a Monday afternoon, and it got me out of double maths, which was brilliant. But Gary made the grade, as we all know, and my love for football was pretty early on replaced by alcohol, women, and tobacco. Not necessarily in that order, but my parents gave up on me, really, because when you're that age, you think you know it all, don't you? And I went my own way. So, age 21, joined the police, didn't spend long in uniform, as I say, and when I went into the CID in the late 80s, I really thought I'd arrived. And the police in our CID office was, he's going to fetch the police now, isn't he? Our office was, there was a big drinking culture in our office. The banter was incredible. Some of the stuff we've got up to, I can't repeat, but I wanted to be the best detective in the office, and I was. I had a reputation of being a thief-taker. They do say it takes one to catch one, and there's never a truer phrase. And I was a thief-taker, so I had the most number of prisoners, I had the most number of informants, I had the best personal detection rate, all that stuff, and I wanted to be the best. And I could drink any of my colleagues under the table, not a problem. That's what I was. That became my driving force. Now, in the late 80s, early 90s, Leicestershire had the misfortune of having a number of murder inquiries which seemed to happen back to back. And every time this happened, it was the policy to form an incident room to work on whatever it was, and you used to pull a team of detectives from around the county to form said incident room. And every time this happened, I was crewed up with a real good mate of mine, a bloke named Tim, and Tim worked in a police station 12 miles away. No, am I all right? Normally I don't have a microphone because our church had a new PA system, and the lady running it, a little lady called Eva, who's about this big, and she's fearsome. And the new PA arrived, and I was speaking, and afterwards she said, "I'm really sorry, I forgot to put your microphone on." I said, "Eva, it's okay, I've got a big gob." And she went, "Yes, you have." Anyway, so every time we had a murder inquiry, I was working with Tim, and Tim was a superb fella. He was such a laugh. He thought he could drink me under the table. He tried many times and failed, but we were like that. And if you've ever worked in that sort of environment, you get a rapport going with somebody, and if you're with them 16 hours a day on a murder inquiry, you get to know them, or so you think. And we were so busy on these inquiries that Tim and I, we had this joke. This is not funny, but it gives you a flavour of what we're about. We said that the next murder inquiry we were assigned to, we'd drag the body just outside of Leicestershire, so they've got to deal with it and not us. Which is not funny, I know, but that sort of got us through some difficult times. But anyway, I went to work one morning in 1995, Saturday morning, to be greeted by my detective inspector, who ushered me into his office, and he said, "You better sit down." And I said, "Why?" He said, "There's no easy way to tell you, but last night, Tim took his own life." And my mate Tim actually took his own life 100 yards across the border into Warwickshire. So our puerile gag became a reality. And to say I didn't cope with it very well is a bit of an understatement. I asked myself loads of questions. Why didn't he say something? And then I thought, perhaps he did and I wasn't listening. And all these things are going through my mind. And only I knew that our puerile gag had come to fruition, as I say. And I didn't cope with that very well at all. There were the days before any formal counselling or sort of bereavement input. The answer to everything then was, "Let's go and have a beer. We'll be all right." And that was the answer to everything. It's not helpful, but that's all there was on offer. So I became a real angry man. And just to put that into context, I was a CID officer, and we also have a department of traffic police. And the CID and the traffic officers never got on. And I knew I was going down the pan. I was drinking more heavily than I ever did, and I knew that I was going down the pan, as I say. In fact, I think I knew I hadn't just pressed the self-destruct button, I was leaning on it. And like I say, I became really angry. And it came to fruition, two things very quickly. One was, one of the traffic officers put the word out that for Christmas he was going to breathalyse a detective, and it was going to be me. Of course, word got back to me. Well, we used to drink and drive all the time. We thought we were the dogs. We really did. It's not big, it's not clever, but often used to have a load of beer and drive home. Don't do it. I've done it. So we thought we were above the law. And word got back to me that this traffic officer was going to have me for his Christmas present. So we went into the bar one night after shift, when police stations had bars. And I was with my CID colleagues, and there was a few traffic lads in there, including said officer. And I didn't say anything to him. I just walked up to him and I punched him as hard as I could. And he went down like a sack of potatoes. I'm not a hard man. I'm not. I bruise easily. And he went down like a sack of potatoes, which to my colleagues was fair game because he asked for it. But I didn't leave it there. I battered him and I put him in hospital. And when I was interviewed about it, I was asked, how many times did you punch him? And I said 4 or 5. And they said, well, all the witness statements we've got here say they lost count at 30 odd times. I know I could have killed that bloke. I'd lost it. I could have killed him. Thankfully, he never did complain. Had he complained, I'd have lost my job and I would probably have gone to prison. But he never did complain. So I've got an anger issue. And it also came to light, and this was a catalyst really. I've been interviewing a suspect, an old boy actually, for some historical offences he'd committed against his daughters, who were now adults. So how it was working, we had a team of detectives interviewing them. They were feeding stuff into us, and we were interviewing the suspect about it. And it was a real long day of intense interviews. And towards the end of the day, word got to us that this bloke we were interviewing had started to abuse his granddaughter, who was 6. So armed with this information, I walked straight into that interview room and I grabbed him by the throat, pushed him up against the wall and said, just give me a reason why I shouldn't put you through this wall, which is not really the thing to do when his defence solicitor is sitting next to him. Wasn't the best thing I ever did. So I knew I got a problem. I couldn't sleep, so I tried to induce sleep any way I could. And if that meant having half a bottle of Bell's on my cornflakes, that's what I did. And I was drinking really, really heavily. I then decided I didn't want to be married anymore, so I left my wife. I'd got 2 daughters, aged 9 and 7, and I left. And this was compounded by the fact that prior to me leaving my wife, Sue, she'd become a Christian. And I thought, now I am lower than snake's testicles in the grand scheme of things. I'm right down the pecking order now. And I hated it. I hated her friends at church. I hated them. And I accused Sue of poisoning the minds of our girls. Plus, church had no relevance in my life at all. And on the rare occasion I'd been to church, I just found it odd. I couldn't get my head round the fact, how can you sing a song about loving another bloke? Why are there all these flowers? Why are there all these pictures drawn by kids? Why are there all these nice things? Why does it smell of lavender? And the bloke running the thing, in an Anglican tradition, is wearing a frock. What is that about? And it had no relevance to my life. I was working in the police, in the roughy-tufty sharp end of crime, and then you'd be in church and there'd be all these nice twee people there who I thought, particularly blokes. And I thought, these are the weediest blokes I've ever seen. And it never helped. I'm going to use an example, sir. This is not personal, so please don't punch me afterwards. If you're familiar with the Anglican tradition, they have a bit in the service called the peace. Yeah? And I remember being there, whether it was somebody's child's baptism or whatever it was. I was there under duress anyway. And this bloke came up to me at the peace. And he went, peace be with you. And he went, no. And he did that with his thumb. And he went, it's the dove of peace. And I just thought, what is that about? So I hated it. And on the very odd, social thing they did, barbecue or whatever they did, on the very rare one I went to, all I did was try and cause as much trouble as I could. And I had a reputation in the church as being known as the bloke who occasionally speaks between swearing. I was just trying to rev them up. I loved it. I used to rev them up. So I decided I didn't want to be married. I walked out on my wife. And for some time, Sue had seen me going spiralling downwards. So she'd confided in our vicar that my husband's not right. So our vicar, his name was Tony, he's now retired. Tony said, I'll go and speak to him. And she said, no. If you do, he's likely to assault you. Because that's where I was. And on the night I announced I was leaving, Sue was taking the girls to pantomime. And I said, when you come back, I won't be here. Because I'm going. And she still took the girls to the pantomime because she promised them. But unbeknown to me, as I am loading my car up with my worldly possessions, because I'm going to go, up turned this little vicar. Or turned up, whichever way. This little vicar. And he's about 5 foot in a fag paper. And I thought, oh, no, you're all I want. Go away. Go away. I couldn't get rid of him. He won't go away. I tried every word of Anglo-Saxon that I knew to get rid of him. And he won't go away. And he said to me, well, I said to him, look, I just wanted to get shut. So I said, when I'm sorted out, I'll come and talk to you. And he went, right, now you've said that. If I said to you, I'm going to come and talk to you, and I didn't, you'd call me a hypocrite, wouldn't you? I said, yeah. Well, I'm a lot of things, but one of them, I'm definitely a man of my word. Even then, I always have been. If I say I'm going to do it, I'll do it. So I left. I got rid of him and I left. I got nowhere to go. So I sofa surfed. I slept in our office at the police station, and I even sometimes slept in the cell block because the breakfast was all right. Not as good as that one, but it was all right, you know. And I got nowhere to go, and I was just going down the toilet. I really was. Couldn't sleep, as I say, due to anxiety and everything else. So I tried to induce sleep any way I could. That included dabbling in substances you don't buy over the counter at Boots. And when you've worked in the drug squad, it's pretty easy to get what you want. Dead easy. I knew where to go. And I knew people would keep their mouths shut because they were frightened of me because of my job. So I was really going down the pan. So I worked out that if I am permanently asleep, I'll be okay. And it's as simple as that, as blinkered as that. So I decided to take my own life. So I didn't tell anybody. I just decided that that was it. And the world would be a better place if Paul Gask wasn't in it. So I made the decision to jump from a railway bridge in the city centre on New Year's Eve, of all things, going into 1996. And it was surreal, really, because there I was feeling thoroughly, utterly wretched. And people were celebrating because it was New Year. And I felt worse than I've ever felt. So I climbed on to this railway bridge, and I was literally one step from going over when I became aware of an inner voice which I wrote off as conscience. But this voice in my head said, just remember how angry you were when Tim took his own life. Don't do it. And it sort of brought me back to my senses. And I got off the wall and I was walking around for 3 days until I found myself at the door of our vicarage. Tony, little vicar, answered the door and went, hello, Paul, like that. And he invited me in, and I couldn't talk for an hour. I was proper upset, proper bloke's cry, you know, snot the lot, everything. I couldn't talk to him. And eventually he said, what are your plans? And I said, I haven't got any. So I didn't even plan to be alive today. I haven't got any. So he said, well, do you want to go home? I said, how can I? I put my wife through hell. I really did. I'd started divorce proceedings. I'd got a solicitor involved. That was a good investment, wasn't it? But I thought, how can I go home? I can't. And I wasn't man enough to go to my own home and talk to my wife without holding the hand of this little vicar. So he was like this, come on. And we walked in home, and my wife, Sue, bless her, allowed me back into a life. And we've now been married for 37 years. So I always say we've been married 37 years, give or take a couple of months. That's what we say now. And the reason she said that, in human terms, my wife is the hero in my story, in human terms. But she was prompted to read a passage from 2 Corinthians in the Bible where it's I'll have to paraphrase it, but it's questions about marriage. And it says, if your unbelieving husband leaves, let him leave in peace. You never know, wife, how you handle this might not only bring him back to you, but back to me. And she clung on to that. And she dreamt that I was working for a Christian organisation, that I was preaching in church, I've obviously done that, and I was singing in a Christian rock band. I've got a little bit of background in performing and singing. And when I was in the police, we were in a rock covers band called, wait for this one, PCDC. How about that, eh? And then, once upon a time, in the late 90s, I was lead singer of a Christian rock band called Eye to Eye, which you've never heard of. There's a couple of CDs floating around somewhere. You might find one in some corner of a charity shop one day, I don't know. But I've done that. So Sue clung on to that, despite the fact there were people in church who'd said to her, get rid of him, he's a tosser. Get shut on him. And some people in church did say that. And they've admitted that to me. Anyway, so I told Sue that I'd considered topping myself. So she's straight on the phone to our GP. Our GP was a member of our church. You know where this is going, don't you? So I'm dispatched to see my GP, who says to me, you need an urgent mental health assessment. And he said to Sue, look, if you can't take him, then I'm going to get an ambulance because it's that bad. He needs some professional input now. So I was transported to a mental health unit at one of Leicester's hospitals. And as I walked down towards this assessment unit, it was a bit like a long corridor with a polytunnel. And on the way there, I said to Sue, if they admit me or section me or anything like that, I'm going to kick off. I was in a bad place. I'm going to kick off. And she said, we'll worry about it if we have to. Anyway, we walked down and I'm ready. I'm ready for this. We walked down this corridor and this door opened and this big fellow appeared. And I thought, oh, he's a big lad. But I thought, if I hit him first as hard as I can, I might get away with it. And then another door opened. I think it was his twin brother, an equally big fella. And then two more doors opened, and I thought, I've got no chance. I ain't going to win this one. So I went through this mental health assessment, and I was diagnosed as suffering from severe depression, and also the equivalent then of what is PTSD from some of the stuff I've had to deal with. And I was placed on medication. I wasn't admitted, thankfully. They put me on medication. And I was sent home, and Sue was instructed, don't leave him on his own at all till the medication kicks in. It's going to take 2 weeks for the medication to work. So don't leave him on his own, which is really embarrassing when you want to go to the toilet. And your wife's there. Can't go because you're looking at me. But that's how it was. And my psychiatrist, parting words to me were, if you want to save your marriage, you've got to tell your wife exactly what you've been up to. And I thought, how can I do that? I'd had numerous little affairs with several ladies, some of whom Sue knew. We were £15,000 in debt because most of that had gone up my nose. I thought, how can I tell her these things? But I knew I had to. Now, I was sharing with the fellas on that table earlier about the best bit of theology I've ever heard is this. A good confession is like a good puke. It makes a hell of a mess, but it's better out. Not biblical, by the way, but I think that's brilliant. And I knew I had to do it. So I made these revelations to Sue. We're still married. I had a load of brownie points to earn, as you probably appreciate. So I'm on the sick. I'm on medication, and I'm a mess. I developed a telephone phobia, So when the phone rang, in the old days of landlines, when the phone went at home, I used to run upstairs and try and lock myself in the bathroom. Ridiculous, isn't it? But very frightening and a real thing for me, mainly because every phone call is grief in the job I was in. Every phone call. So I was a mess. So I got brownie points to earn. So Sue said to me, we are having a bring and share evening at the vicarage. Will you come? And I thought, oh, please, no. No, please. I had no choice. I said, yes, I'll go. And on the way around there, I said to Sue, look, the first bloke who says something, I'm going to take him outside and I'm going to give him a slap. I said, I'm just telling you. And she said, nobody will say anything. I said, yes, they will. They will, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen. I don't want to spoil your night, but it's going to happen. She said, it won't happen. And I turned up at the vicarage, and I spent the evening with some church men. None of them said anything. All of us can learn from this, myself included. None of them judged me. None of them pointed the finger. He's done this, he's done that, he's done the other. None of them did. Took the wind out of my sails. Really took the wind out of my sails. Also, I learned that night that those blokes I was talking to who knew Jesus were some of the strongest men I'd ever met. They weren't these weedy blokes that I thought they were. They were some of the strongest men I'd ever met. And I had a great night. And we went home and I went to bed and I had some pleasant thoughts for a change. Went to sleep. I then had what I can only describe as my worst nightmare ever. Now, I'm not easily intimidated. I've been around a bit, as you probably appreciate. I've been stabbed twice. I'm not going to show you where, because you've just had your breakfast. But I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. Thankfully, it missed. And I've had my nose broken more times than I care to remember. So I'm not easily frightened. But this was the most frightening experience of my life. And it was very real. In my nightmare, I was being pulled between two forces. On one side, it was nothing, black. On the other side, was a tiny speck of light. And I was being pulled between the two. And I didn't care which side won. I just wanted to be let go. Unbeknown to me, because I was asleep, my wife is praying over me. She can see something's going on because I'm thrashing about. And she's praying over me. I didn't know. And then after this titanic battle that I was going through, the darkness let go. And I was propelled towards this light, which got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I was released into this pure light. Not this sort of light, but a pure blinding light. And I woke up. I sat up in bed. I was drenched with sweat and confused about what I'd just experienced. At this point, Sue, bless her, decides now's the time to fetch a copy of the Why Jesus booklet that she'd hidden in her sewing basket downstairs. So off she goes out the bedroom. And then I become aware of another presence in our room, in our bedroom. And in the corner, in the gloom of our bedroom, a figure held out his hands towards me and said, Paul, just trust in me. And I knew it was Jesus. I just knew it was. Now, you think being an ex-cop, I can give you a better description. He's about 5'10". I can't do that. And it's not a cop-out. I can't do that. All I can say is it was pure peace, a peace that I've never experienced before. So at 1:10 a.m. on Sunday, the 3rd of March, 1996, my life changed forever. My life changed in an instant. Knew Jesus was alive. Didn't know him. Had to start a journey of getting to know him. My first Bible was a kid's Bible. I'm not ashamed to say that. I had pictures in it. It was great. That was my first Bible. I then did Alpha, if you're familiar with the Alpha course. I did Alpha. I had to do it twice. I had so many questions, and I'm a little bit slow on the uptake that I did the Alpha course twice. And I started to explore and get to know Jesus. Of course, I had to go back to work. I had to go back to that environment at the CID office. So, and to be fair to my colleagues, I could have been a little bit more subtle. because I walked in, I've been off for 4.5 months. I walked in the office and I went, fellas, whilst I've been off, I've met the risen Lord Jesus Christ. And they went, Gasky, since you've been off with a mental health problem, we don't think you should be back yet. And I get it. And I went in one day and my desk was covered in a purple cloth with a candle on the corner, like an altar. And we had a tannoy system that was audible in the police station car park. And I got out of my car one morning to be greeted by 1,000 decibels of onward Christian soldiers. So they took the mick, you know, and I get it. They tried to explain away what happened, and I understand that. Some said I made it up to save my marriage. I get why they would say that. But to be honest, my marriage didn't mean a lot to me at that particular time. Some said that I was hallucinating. All I can say is I've never hallucinated before, or indeed since, but I get why they would say it. Some said it was as a result of the medication I was on. Well, I looked at that label on that bottle of Prozac, and it never said a likely side effect is a visit from Christ. It didn't say that. But I get why they would say it. And my answer to them was, you'll see. You'll see what happens. That was 1996. We're now 2022. If I'd have made it up, why, and this will make you laugh, why would I have done 3 years theological study to be licensed by the Church of England? You can't believe that, can you? I can't either. But I got licensed as an evangelist, because in the Church of England you have to have a bit of paper so you can do it. And you know, and I'm gonna pause it there because I don't want to go on forever, and I don't want Denver throwing something at me. But if you've not had a story like that, it's important to tell you that because I have, my faith is no better than yours, okay? I'm not the finished article at all, far from it. I'm not immune to the crap in life either. It's only 12 years ago since we lost our granddaughter. And I had to go, not just me, but we went through that indescribable pain as my son-in-law carried that little casket through the church at a funeral. And it scarred my heart. I'm not immune to it. I am not the man I should be, but I'm not the man I was, if that makes sense. So now, I don't want that day to come. This is why I do what I do. I'm going to go to glory. If you know Jesus, you go into glory, which is fantastic. I don't want to get there and him say to me, can you just wait a minute, because it's a bit of a queue. I want him to go, here's that bloke, Gasky, you had a go for me. Here's your room. I don't want to just sneak over the finishing line. I want to, if I can speak to him. I've got a lot of questions I want to ask him. If I can speak, I'm going to ask him. If I can speak. He'll tell me, and then I'll understand, because there's lots of stuff I don't get. And I don't want to get there and see my mates, people, guys I know, who say to me, why didn't you tell me, Gasky? And I'll be able to look them in the eye and say, I did. And I'm not frightened, and there's a reason for this. So I'm going to pause it there.
I just want to kind of just encourage us, as we've been gathering together as men back again after COVID with breakfast. One of the things that we really do have on our hearts, as a few of us as men has kind of got together and discussed it and chatted together, is the fact of us just being together as men. I don't know what you think, but there's a lot of ladies' events, there's a lot of activities that ladies do. There's a lot of, tea and cake and chatting together. And, if you Google online, there's a lot of conferences for ladies. There's not a lot for men. I know Life Church have done a thing called Excel, and I think they're possibly carrying that on this year. I know the kind of Cherish thing has finished and various other things. And I know some local churches maybe do something with their own men, you know, kind of as a church. But what we try to do is gather men together as churches. So there's like Church on the Way, there's ourselves, there's also at Bolton Villas with Ashley Evans, there's the URC through Pastor John on Home Wood, and there's one or two, there's Together Church in Barnsley, and we've spoken to Matt Barlow and one or two other churches around in the community, one or two from Harrogate as well, and one or two in Centre of Leeds and things as well, and obviously in our local community, about men just gathering together. And it's not about kind of anybody owning it, it's not about anybody having control of it. Obviously we believe in the aspect of a vision, we believe in outlines of you know, passion, purity and prayer and purpose, kind of some of the P's, you notice all the P's? Because I think we need a passion, we need to understand the aspects of purity, prayer, and we need an aspect of purpose as well. So, and we'd already kind of put the dates in the diary for this over a couple of days, and we're going to do one next year as well. And I think Beachy and one or two others will be with us next year, hopefully once we get the dates in place as well. But this year we've got Bruce Dyer coming, and we've got Paul Lloyd as well from Victory Outreach, a friend of mine over in Manchester, who's allegedly been a gangster and allegedly a criminal and so on. So he's got a great story and a great testimony. And then Bruce Dyer, as we know, he has been here with us, and he's played for England and also Crystal Palace and Barnsley and one or two other places around the country. So he's going to be with us as well and sharing. Now, the interesting fact is it's the 25th and 26th of November, as you can see. Is football something that we need if we're addicted to pornography or we're addicted to relationships? Is football we need if we don't know our purpose and if we struggle to pray? Football is not what we need. Sometimes that's a good aspect of a reflection of something we can do, and we can gather together as friends and do that. So we're going to carry on and do that weekend, which is 7 p.m. on the Friday, which is around curry. There'll be different curries. There'll be an alternative to curry as well. They won't be hot. That evening is when Paul will be sharing his testimony, and there'll be worship as well. Together Church in Barnsley kind of doing the worship for us as well that weekend. And then on the Saturday we'll be here again at 9 a.m. for some breakfast, and there'll be session 1, session 2, and then there'll be lunch. And again, everything we do, we cater, is free with donation basis on that, okay? So again, we're stepping out, kind of putting our necks on the line for that, because we do believe in catering and giving out to men. We have a few people that partner with us, even on the men's breakfast. There are people that generously partner with us. You know, just to do a breakfast alone is between £70 to £100 just for the food. And then there's people we bring in and they travel, and we want to bless them for their ministry as well. But we believe that where God is leading us, God will feed us. And I believe, personally, even my own experience, my own journey, there is a need for men to get fed, for men to fellowship together, and for us to be vulnerable and able to be real together as well. So I would really challenge you with that and encourage you. There is also a Christian Life Church in Shipper that's involved with this as well, and Adam Carver. And I do think it's important for the pastors to be able to steer the journey ahead as well with this. So, you know, people are on board with this, and we've encouraged churches, if they'd like to partner with it as well, to help us to partner together as well. But